Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. Hey friends, we need your help. In order to help keep this show going, we need to hear back from you. Please take some time and check out our evaluation. Let us know if you like the show, and especially let us know if you've used any of the information you've gained from our show. Once again, you can reach us directly. You can call Karen at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673. Or you can reach Dan at 740-695-1455. That's 740-695-1455.
Hello, Karen.
Hey, Dan.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
We're right there. We're right there.
It's Thursday, so, for those of you who are listening to the podcast on your day of choice, well, maybe it is already Thanksgiving. But for those on the radio, we hope that everyone can take a few moments to remember all the things that we can be thankful for.
Yeah, and quite a lot of holidays in November. I forgot how many there were. We just keep thinking like Christmas time, and then all of a sudden there's Veterans Day, there's Thanksgiving.
And then there's my son's birthday.
And before you know it, we're in 2024. And wow. No, but it's harvest time. I think for the most part, a lot of people got most of the harvesting done from the looks of it. This dry period has really helped out. And yeah, it seems like as far as yield goes, I haven't really got any estimates, but it seems like a lot of the harvest is done. And I think people can give thanks to that.
For sure. Yeah. It's time for farmers to, take a breath. And so we do hope that as you are getting your last minute stores and stocks for your Thanksgiving table, that you do think about any farmers that are still selling products, whether they be pumpkins for pumpkin pie or turkeys or even sweet potatoes. Try to find a locally grown option for those things and support your local farms.
Oh, yeah. And that's just huge. And we've talked about this before, but those local products just kind of taste so much better. Tree ripening, plant ripening, vine ripening, whatever, wherever that fruit or vegetable comes from, the less transportation, the better it's going to taste.
Exactly. And we mentioned earlier things that we could be thankful for this Thanksgiving holiday. And one of the things I am always thankful for at Thanksgiving is sweet potato casserole.
Well, I'm not always thankful for that, but I am very thankful that it exists, I just don't run into it very often.
Really? It's not a staple at your table?
I do run into, I run into green bean casserole with frequency.
See, that's something that I'm not a fan of. I don't know. I know it's a Thanksgiving staple in a lot of homes and a lot of people really love it, but I have never liked it. Yeah.
Well, no, but I do love sweet potato casserole, or just in really any form. Sweet potato is just a really good vegetable.
Yeah, and one of the great things about sweet potatoes is that they have a very low glycemic index. And so for diabetics, they can safely add sweet potatoes because of that low glycemic index. Now, once you add a bunch of marshmallows, brown sugar, and butter, it's not necessarily low, but you can roast sweet potatoes and get a very flavorful side dish that doesn't have all of the extra calories. So as we go into these holiday seasons, do think about ways to prepare things so that they aren't loaded with calories and fats and sugars. Just make everyone a little bit healthier this season.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that, but I do remember hearing something about foods that contain fiber as well as complex carbohydrates kind of balance out so that the sugar spike isn't so sudden, kind of like buffers it a little bit more.
Yeah, beets are another really good one to add. There's an article from Mississippi State University Extension and Vardaman, Mississippi. That is the sweet potato capital of the world. It's one of our top producers of sweet potatoes. At least they were in 2019 when this article was published.
I mean, that sounds like a wonderful place to visit on Thanksgiving. And they're going to have warmer weather than we do down there.
This is true. This is true. And so when you are buying your sweet potatoes, even if you are buying them at the grocery store, look for something that was produced in the United States. On the packages, they typically will publish where that crop came from or where that commodity came from, and try to find something from our country if you're not getting it locally from your local farm.
And sweet potatoes tend to get roped with a standard potato. From a botany perspective, they're actually pretty different. Sweet potato is a true root. So what you'll have in the sweet potatoes is you do have those carotenoids stored there, like carrots, as opposed to a potato that really doesn't store a lot of carotenoids, but can have other pigments as well. Like you have potatoes that are purple, right? So you have the anthocyanin, and it's a more of a modified stem, what we're looking at for standard potatoes. And in sweet potato, we're looking more of a root. So it is a different profile as far as vitamins go, and obviously taste. But just goes to show, sometimes we have those common names and things can get a little confusing and blurred, and what we think might be related isn't necessarily the case. But we all know the name sweet potato.
Yes. When we look at the store shelves, we might even see them labeled as yams. And most of what we get in the United States are not yams. Yams need very hot climates to grow. And so they grow well in Africa and the Caribbean. And so if you're at a specialized African or Caribbean market, you can probably find yams. But otherwise, they're more likely to be sweet potatoes. And sweet potatoes are actually in the morning glory family. So another weird plant that is in a poisonous family that's not poisonous. But yeah, and they can range from a lot of different colors, like your skin color can be white, yellow, red, purple, or even brown, like a regular potato. But the flesh is pretty much a white to yellow, orange, or orange-red color. Now, the reason that we call sweet potatoes yams in the United States is because when we first started growing sweet potatoes, we grew a very firm variety because they are not native to the United States, but we grew a very firm variety. And when we introduced the softer one, which is the one we eat today, they needed a way to differentiate the product in the market because they look fairly similar. Because a lot of the African slaves were familiar with yams, they started calling the softer sweet potatoes yams. And so this was a term that was brought over from Africa through the slave trade. And that is why we call sweet potatoes yams. So, but they are definitely not. They are, like I said, in the morning glory family. And they are very different. Yams are going to be more like a tuber. So they can get like 5 feet long and weigh 100 pounds. They get really big. And they also can be regular potato sized, but it's a very different structure. Yams are a little starchier. They're going to be drier. So you're not going to prepare them in this exactly the same way. And they're going to have a different flavor profile to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny that they're in the morning glory family. Morning glories are more of a decorative type invasive plant. But some people use sweet potatoes for decorative purposes. The vines that grow from the sweet potato, there are varieties that are meant to be more decorative, and you see a lot of those in hanging baskets and things like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So many different varieties, many uses.
So the ones we grow for food, when you are wanting to plant them, is going to be way back in the springtime.
Well, way in the future springtime now. I think you can't. Yeah, start planning for your sweet potatoes in the spring.
That's right. You're right. Yeah, you can't go back in time and plant your sweet potatoes in the spring or last spring. You'll have to try again for next year.
Yeah. So when you're planting them, Typically, what you're going to do is you're going to plant sprouted new shoots called slips, and you'll want the soil to be warmed up to about 65 degrees, right? So 65 degrees, we're probably looking at May. Don't try to get it in early. The temperature usually takes a while to warm up to 65. And if the temperature just isn't there, there's no growth. You're not gaining any days by planting them early. So we're looking at planting these slips when the soil reaches 65 degrees. And, that's going to vary a little bit on where you are, obviously. For us in Ohio, I would say mid-May is a safe time to do it. If it's warmer than usual, even early May would be okay.
But remember, air temperature isn't the same as soil temperature. And so if you want your soil temperature at around, what'd you say, 63 degrees?
65 degrees.
65 degrees, then you actually need to take a thermometer and stick it into the soil to the depth that you're going to be planting.
Right. And meat thermometers work great for this.
Yes.
I just would not reuse it in the meat.
Yeah, get yourself a designated soil thermometer. It can be a meat thermometer. They all measure temperature the same. You could get a compost thermometer, whatever. You just have to know that it goes low enough for the temperature you want.
Yes.
And make sure that it is designated for that use.
Right. And that's going to be the most accurate way to do it. Here's the kicker too. So when you're planting the site, realize that sweet potatoes, just like morning glories, like full sun. So you want them to have 8 to 10 hours of sunlight a day. You want good drainage, and because the sweet potato is the root, you don't want compacted soils. You want nice, loose, fluffy soils to get a large root growth in it. So you want light, sandy soils. The higher the organic matter, the better. But one of the most important things is you want to make sure that you have full sun. And it takes 85 to 120 days to maturity. So it's one of those that you plant early, May, and you're not really getting much until September. September is when you're looking at harvesting these. So dedicate the space to it, and that's what you're growing.
Yeah, and you also want to watch with sweet potatoes too. They're, again, like carrots, where you need that loose, fluffy soil. So it's really important that you're not just sticking them into your standard clayey garden bed. You want to fluff it up a good deal with some extra organic matter, or grow them in a raised bed. And you also are going to have to watch for weed encroachment because it's such a long period for growing. You do need to make sure that you are keeping up with the weeds and not allowing them to get overgrown.
Yeah, and that's always a challenge. I did carrots, and the beauty with carrots is you could plant them a lot earlier, and had some nice carrots, harvested carrots for a while, but then the weeds eventually caught up to me about the same time that my wife was getting tired of eating carrots all the time. But when you're not working it anymore, the weeds do take over. Then it just becomes hard to pull the weeds and harvest the carrots at the same time. It just kind of laid to rest at that point, and that's what I did. But spacing wise, you need 12-inch rows with 40 inches between the rows. This is going to be a vine, so it's going to grow out. It's going to take up a lot of space. It does require full sun. Give them proper spacing. Otherwise, you get mini sweet potatoes, which are still not called yams, right, Karen?
Correct.
They're just small sweet potatoes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so, when you are growing your sweet potatoes, you do also want to watch for nematodes. Nematodes are a huge problem with sweet potatoes, especially for places that have recently been transitioned from hay or grass. There are a lot of nematodes that live in the roots of those grasses. And if you're switching it over to grow potatoes or sweet potatoes or carrots even, you may have some challenges with managing nematodes. Now, there are some controls that you can put out, but you need to think in advance and not just switch it right over and till up your grass and throw some sweet potatoes in the ground.
Yeah, and another major problem with sweet potatoes is voles. And, I'd say field mice as well. It's hard to grow large starchy type vegetables, whether they're potato or sweet potato or carrots, without the mice family getting in there and eating away. So just watch for rodents, rodent damage, and that would just come basically chunks out of it getting eaten up. And if that happens, it's contaminated. Probably not the ones that you're going to sell.
Oh, definitely not.
But if that's the case, the best thing to do is just set up a few traps. And, if you give them something that they prefer that's easier to get to, besides sweet potatoes, chances are they're going to fall in your trap, and then you just reload it.
Yeah. And with voles travel underneath the superficial ground cover. So if you have mulch or something that you're using to try to keep the weeds down, they will travel under the mulch and attack the roots of the plants from there. So when you're putting your traps in, you need to find their trail and put the trap in that path so that when they run across it'll snap over on them, or trap them if you're using a live trap. But you do need to keep that covered. They're not going to go over something that is out in the open. So if you're having trouble getting traps to work for voles, that may be one of your issues. Sometimes just putting a cardboard box over it, like an old shoe box that you cut the ends out of, that can be enough. But try to keep it so that it is covered and so that the animal feels safe running across it.
And when you're buying the slips that I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
which are just cuttings of the shoot, you have to realize that they're going to root, and they're going to send up the shoot as well, because they're a little bit different than potatoes. I mean, they're a lot different than potatoes, but botanically. You'll want to get your slips from a certified garden center, and make sure you read the directions in those. A lot of times these slips will have some anti-sprouting chemicals, nothing dangerous, but just some hormones that will inhibit germination, things that naturally occur in the plant as well. I mean, if you think about it, if you didn't have any kind of signal that would prevent a corn kernel from sprouting, then it would sprout right on the cob.
Mm-hmm.
These are just things that the plants respond to, but sometimes they just require a little wash. So make sure you read the directions and you don't give yourself any more hardship than necessary. So just like a seed packet, anytime you order a plant, read the little sticker on there, read the little sheet of paper that comes with it. I mean, it's something that makes a big difference. And when you're talking about 120 days to maturity, you don't want to mess something that simple up. And then when you're planting them, you basically cover the bottom of the container with 1 to 2 inches of coarse sand or soilless growing mix, and keep it moist. You might need some irrigation for a nice harvest, because it does take a long time to grow. And, you're talking about pretty much the bulk of the growing happening in the summer, when sometimes we don't have enough rain. So, it's a crop that's going to take some care.
Well, sweet potatoes are known to be drought tolerant, but if you want to have a good production, you need to give it about an inch of water a week. So, yeah, they can be just like any plant, they're going to do okay. But if you want a good sized crop, you need to give it those ideal growing conditions.
I'm assuming that people want a good crop.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying that if you forget to water once a week, maybe it won't kill them.
Right.
But it can give you a better harvest, a more full harvest, and maybe you don't want a full harvest because you planted too many plants and you're like, oh, well, I should probably cut this back a little bit because it's just for myself and my family, But I did want to go back a little bit because we skipped over a very important step, and that is getting your soil tested, right? So you want to get your soil test done ahead of time and know usually we recommend soil tests in the fall or winter so that if you do need to add lime, it has that time to react with the minerals and nutrients in the soil to adjust the pH.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at sweet potatoes, their ideal pH is 5.8 to 6.0. So their ideal is pretty narrow, but they can tolerate as low as 5.5 and up to 6.8. So again, what do you want your crop to look like? The more ideal your soil conditions are, the healthier your crop is going to be, the more resistant to disease and pests it's going to be. And of course, the more product you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. At 5.8 to 6, it might not take as much lime as you think, but maybe it does. You might have to go the other way. You might actually have to add some sulfur and acidify it a little bit to get it to where you want it. But I mean, Karen did say it was a pretty big range, so if you're close to that, you might just be okay. But you don't know until you soil test. So do the soil test. And a soil test is great because, one, you're going to get a very accurate measurement on not only the pH, but also the soil composition, as far as how much clay is there, how much sand is there, how much silt is there. And what it does is it allows you to buffer it more accurately so that you can adjust that pH and you're adding enough of the bicarbonate that will react with the soil that's there to kind of get over that buffering potential that's going to keep it fixed. So if you don't add enough lime, you're not going to get it to move. So, pay attention to that and make sure, especially with the liming, that you are pretty accurate. Otherwise, you're not going to get the soil to where you want it. It's not a linear curve. So you're going to have to really follow the soil test recommendation, especially with liming and when you're adjusting the chemistry or the pH.
Yeah, very true, very true. And, after you have adjusted your soil, the sweet potato is really not going to need a whole lot. You can give it a little bit of nitrogen side dressed to get it going. But they really are going to be pretty easy after that point. So about 3 weeks after planting, give them about 12 ounces per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen. And then once the vines begin to run, when they start getting really long, you can side dress them again with that 12 ounces per 1,000 square feet. Otherwise, once you get your soil balanced and you have the proper amounts of phosphorus, it's pretty stable, and potassium, you'll be all right. So do your soil test, adjust your soil before you plant, and then you just add a little bit of nitrogen to keep them going through the season.
And at harvest, again, it takes 90 to 120 days to get some nice sized sweet potatoes. So we're getting into when it starts getting cold. So you need to make sure that you harvest them before the first killing frost. And, something else that you have to understand is when the temperatures of the soil start dropping, like when it starts getting in the 50s down in the soil, you're going to start getting root rot. And that's your crop right there. You're harvesting the root. So make sure that you're harvesting before the first killing frost and that the temperatures don't start dropping too rapidly in the ground before you harvest, because you want to make sure that you have a nice healthy root. Even if you stick a sweet potato in the freezer, it'll turn to mush.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the same principle, but you don't even have to go that far.
Yeah. In fact, sweet potatoes, you don't even want to put in the refrigerator. It's too cold for them.
Yeah. So it is something that you have to watch out for. So don't let it sit out in the garden too long. And then when you do harvest it, you don't want to wash the potatoes before storing them. Just put them in a plastic bag at high humidity, close the bags tightly, and just let some air kind of in there. You don't want devoid it of all oxygen, but it does require high humidity. And we cure them for about 2 weeks like that, high humidity, room temperature.
Well, I'm going to say a little bit warmer than room temperature even, because to get a good curing on a sweet potato, they really are going to want it to be around 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And, like Dan was saying, that humidity needs to be super high, like 90%. So think of a hot summer day when you're really uncomfortable, and that's what makes a sweet potato cure really well. So since you're harvesting them when the seasons are changing and you can't be sure of what the temperature is going to be like, a high tunnel that you're putting to bed is a great place to cure your sweet potatoes. So if you have a high tunnel and you're not going to grow anything, you're going to be done for the season. Or if you have shelves in there on the side that you use for growing trays, if you have a greenhouse where you're don't have any plants started because it's, getting to be winter, those places are really great for curing your sweet potatoes at high humidity, at 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit for a couple days at least. And if you don't do this, your sweet potatoes are not going to keep. If you cure them well, they can keep for 6 to 10 months. If you don't cure them, they're going to last a week at the most. So it's really important to get this curing step right.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Yeah, it is a pretty warm curing, not room temperature. I misspoke there. But yeah, I mean, talk about a great vegetable to have. Sounds like a lot of fun. Even, like I said, the foliage is pretty. There are more decorative varieties out there that are just for the foliage. But that doesn't mean that, the ones that we eat don't have pretty foliage as well. It is kind of more of a unique crop that we don't see too much of. So it can be a lot of fun to grow.
Yeah, and you think about your porch pots. You can grow sweet potatoes in your porch pots, and you can have that beautiful foliage, and then harvest your porch pot at the end of the season. So think about what you're planting in. Your potting soil is typically very loose and fluffy, which will make them happy. You just have to be careful not to overplant the pot like you would for a decorative one where you're not trying to get good roots. Make sure you have enough soil volume, and of course, making sure you're watering those pots regularly, because potting soil does drain a lot faster than garden soil.
And if you've already done all this, enjoy your sweet potatoes for Thanksgiving.
That's right. Healthy and yummy. What more can you ask for? If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to your local extension office and maybe even get some good recipes. Hey, friends, we need to hear back from you. Please take some time and check out our evaluation. Let us know if you've used any of the information you've gained from our show. Once again, you can reach us directly. You can call Karen at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673. Or you can reach Dan at 740-695-1455. That's 740-695-1455. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.